This question from Tony on email. After such a dramatic exit last year, why has Maurizio Sarri decided now is a good time to return to Lazio, Lars?
So I do want to point you in the direction of the just very flamboyantly worded statement on the Lazio website. I know man reads words off a note is not typically good podcast content, but it's worth looking into this. They've not just written the sort of we're pleased to welcome him back, blah, blah, blah. Lazio writes, after the experience that began in 2021, the Tuscan coach returns to wear the Biancolesti colours, recalled by an uninterrupted bond with the club, with the fans and with a team that has been able to express their playing style and togetherness under his guidance. The club confidently entrusts Sarri with the technical aspect of the project, with the conviction that his style, his consistency and his working culture bring solid foundations to build an ambitious Lazio-worthy future. But wait, there's more. There's statements from Claudio Lotito, the president, saying, Maurizio Sarri has returned home. His return is a choice from the heart. We want to resume a journey with him that interrupted too soon, knowing that together we can bring back enthusiasm, identity, and ambition. Welcome back to your home, Commander. All credit goes to Football Italia for the translation there, but yikes, that is a club statement. That is fair to say. Lazio are hyped for the return of Sarri.
Indeed, but why? Why would he return? We know why they want him back, but why would he return?
Well, I think there are two halves to it here, aren't there? Because firstly, as you say, there's the Lazio side, and Marco Baroni did a lot of good work this season. They were really competitive and pretty good for a lot of this season. They were in the mix for Champions League on the final day of the season, and they end up missing Europe altogether, which feels like it should be impossible in the modern context when you have the Europa League and the Conference League, but obviously it's defined A by Bologna, who didn't hit any of the European places through the league, winning the Coppa Italia, and B, how close the race was for the European places. I think the other side of it is Sarri. You know, there are a lot of jobs available in Serie A at the moment, but a lot that aren't open to him. So, you know, that I think there was clearly a sense that they need him and he needs them at this particular moment if he's to relaunch himself. And when we talk about really Sarri creating a particular philosophy, Lars, I mean, I guess that's how you sell having no European football next season. You really drill the team.
Yeah, and you remember the fact that, I mean, he did finish second with them last time he was there. Like he did do a good job for the first two seasons. It went really well, and then the second season, when things fell off a cliff a little bit, or at least went wrong, he lost Sergio Milinkovic-Savic to the Saudi League, and he wasn't really replaced in a meaningful way. And this is something Sarri, I mean, Chelsea fans will remember, Sarri has this thing of occasionally being too honest in public. He will veer between saying nothing at all and sometimes just saying way too much. And I mean, he did say during that season that basically he gave the example about, he was asked, what's the translation here? If you ask for a player who is plan A and you make me choose between C and D, it's not like I did the market. He was basically throwing the club president and the rest of the club under the bus. And in the end, I think he lost the dressing room a little bit as well. But he is a coach who can create something special. We've seen that at Napoli, and I would argue that we saw that in his first stint at Lazio. I think getting Lazio to second is pretty special. And he has amazing. A record of... Yeah, and he is someone who... Yeah, he complained about the market there, but he has in the past been someone who's willing to work with financial restraints, he isn't like a Conte who will come in and demand this and this and this. He's someone who can work with what he has and can improve the players he has. And I think it's a logical place for him to go, and I think it's a logical place for Lazio to turn.
And it's a reflection of where he came from, that attitude, isn't it? You know, it was quite late in his career that he broke into top level at Napoli. You know, well into his 50s at that point. And I think Lazio are in quite a delicate situation. I think if you look at the resources that have actually been put in by Lotito and the board, which are limited in recent years, I think there's something to be said for the jobs that not just Sarri has done, but also Baroni in this last season, and Igor Tudor before, even though he decided that it was just enough and he couldn't take it any further. Because if you look at the money they've spent or haven't spent compared to, say, Roma have inherited all the glamour of the city. You know, they've excelled in European competitions. They've had Mourinho and De Rossi. Obviously, they've had a lot of fallout as well post De Rossi. But you know, they've been the team to watch this season. They've consistently filled the stadium in the past 3 years and had some huge European nights. And you know, they've gone out to market and they've bought some players as well. They've had Paulo Dybala, and you get to this summer, and really the standout player for Lazio, Matteo Zaccagni, they might struggle to hold on to him. And I think he would be super difficult to replace. And really, for them to be still in a position for challenging for Europe after Milinkovic-Savic went and after Luis Alberto went, I think really you have to give them a lot of credit for, like the coaches, a lot of credit for how they've kept them on the rails. But this is a big challenge for Sarri, I reckon.
And when you said that some of the jobs in Serie A aren't open to Sarri, what did you mean?
Well, Juventus being the obvious example. You know, they're not going to have him back, are they? Milan was mentioned as a possibility, but they decided to go with Max Allegri in the end. So a lot of those doors shut pretty quickly.
Okay, this question from Jack on X. After his Milan sacking, where does Sérgio Conceição go from here, Andy?
Well, it's funny because given the fact that he started the season without a job and that he won a trophy, albeit the Supercoppa with Milan, 2 games in, it's been such a weird season for Sérgio Conceição. Now, I think despite the fact that they haven't made Europe, despite the fact they didn't win the Coppa Italia final, that they will look back Milan and think this is actually quite a youthful sort of season, half season of Conceição. Because I think the fact that you have a season in which Paulo Fonseca starts, who's is a compatriot but very, very different character to Conceição, and then you get Conceição and he can sort of say, well, actually, this is a problem, and this is a problem, and this is a problem, because he's really blunt. There's no hiding any of it anymore. Now, obviously, that's not ideal for the board because they end up copping a lot of the flack for it, and most of the flack that have been the target of Milan fans' anger in the last month or two has been the board. It hasn't been anything to do with Sérgio Conceição. So I don't think the tools have really been there for him to succeed. I think we know as a coach what his positives and negatives are. I think he will succeed in a lot of other places. He's someone who plays aggressive, physical football. I think he'll do really well elsewhere. I think his hands are partially tied at Milan, and I think people realise that. It would not massively surprise me to see him go back to France. I think he's missed the boat in terms of getting another Serie A job, though further down the line I could see that. Like maybe he's the coach who succeeds Sarri at Lazio, for example, depending on how it's going. Look, he is someone who I think people look at him and think, and certainly the major criticism of him at Porto was he favoured physical players ahead of technically excellent players. But you know what? If you're a lower mid-table team, and like you think when he went into Nantes, for example, and completely transformed them, if you want him to give a team personality and get everyone totally committed, he's your guy. He'll get jobs.
I wouldn't be shocked if one of the mid-table teams in England have a bit of a false start to next season and you get to one of those international windows halfway through the autumn and they're not when they want to be in the table and the squad isn't what they want to be. They think, Sérgio Conceição to come in and give everyone a kick up the backside and structure them and get something out of the season. I think that wouldn't. It's not a. I think that could happen. I think that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, staying on the Italian theme, or you could argue the Scottish theme. Mark my words. Barry on Instagram asked, is Luka Modrić going to be the man to turn things around at Milan? And just to explain, Lars, last week we were talking about Luka Modrić potentially ending up at Glasgow Rangers, but clearly not.
No, that didn't happen. He's not the man alone to turn things around for Milan. But this feeds back to what Andy was just talking about the discontent in the city with the board and the way the club has been running. I was in Milan and watched the team earlier this spring, and spoke to someone who knows the club very well, and the sense is that the fans are not happy with this almost like Moneyball-y approach that the American owners have taken to building a squad. They've brought in a lot of guys who are not bad players. They've been looking for value and they've been trying to find something. But this isn't what Milan's about, you know. Milan's about a glamour. It's about pizzazz. This is still a club that is kind of steeped in the legacy that was created under Silvio Berlusconi and the sort of element of showmanship. And it is interesting going to a match at the San Siro. There's a huge build-up before the game with the DJ and the light show and all of this stuff. And then the game starts and it's just kind of Luka Jovic sort of trundling around out there, and just a lot of really average players. Not terrible players, but it's a very meh. So bringing someone like Modrić in, obviously he's right at the tail end of his career. He's not going to play every minute of every league game, but it gives you a star. It gives you someone to get excited about. It gives you a reason to flock to that magnificent stadium. And it's a good fit. In terms of who's going to turn things around, I mean, there's Conceição is left, as we just talked about, but also there's a change of sporting director with the former Lazio sporting director Iglitare expected to come in.
Here's your reason why Sarri couldn't go to Milan, by the way, because they fell out massively in Lazio.
Yeah, and well, he's gone to Milan, and it's interesting to see if that will herald like a change in strategy in terms of the recruitment, where they have again been a little bit moneyball-y recently, much to the disgruntlement of the fans. Modrić is a very, very different thing, of course, but and there is also, quite aside from all that, a real tradition of the top Croatian players playing in Italy. It feels like maybe for Modrić, this is just something that had to happen before he hung up his boots. He had to play in Italy, kind of, and at Milan, of course, you have the Boban legacy there, one of the great Croatian players of all time. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I love the whole tradition side of it. I mean, immediately when you hear this news, you're like, imagine him in the shirt. That's the first thing you think of, isn't it? Yeah. You know, it feels like part of football heritage. And I think when you look at where Modrić is, like, bear in mind he's turning 40 on 9th of September.
That's amazing.
And you look at him and you think, at this point, it would have been the easiest thing in the world for him to go off to Saudi for a year or two. And no one would have criticised him for it. I don't think. No one would have said, oh, what are you doing? You're flaming your legacy. Of course he's not. But for him to say, I want to go and play for a proper historic club in European football for a fraction of the price. There's something quite nice about that, isn't it? It's really lovely feeling. I just wonder that there are two reasons why I think, going back to Jack's question, like Lars, I think there are limits on it. It's all about who they put around him, because firstly, they're losing legs in midfield because Tijani Reinders is going. I think he's their most athletic midfield player. Modrić will need athletes around him to flourish. There's no doubt about that. And he needs to play less games as well. He played 47 for Real Madrid this season just gone, which was way too much. And you could see him flagging, actually, for the first time. Now, he wanted to play more the season before. And I think this season, where he had to play a little bit more out of necessity, really underlined the reasoning of Ancelotti not playing him more, because he's still got unbelievable quality, but I don't think he can play all the games.
So does he play a bit further back then?
Yeah, but even then, he needs people to do the running around him. And, I think, partly because you had Tchouaméni having to step back into defence, basically Real Madrid's defensive problems led to midfield problems. And that didn't help him, and many didn't have the right structure around him, and he had to play too much last season. I think the other thing with Modrić, I think at Milan, you have to ask, what was the experience of Kyle Walker like? I would love to hear him speak on that, actually, in the coming months. Because if you're someone like Kyle Walker, and Modrić is absolutely in this boat, do you get there and think, yeah, I'm used to better professional standards than this. I'm used to a team of winners. And I wonder if that gets quite frustrating quite quickly. Of course, the little window we saw into that is the little entering the pitch chat we saw between Kyle Walker and Joao Felix when he was there, where Walker takes him to one side and goes, "Look, mate, no one in this team's messy. Can we play it a little bit more simply, please?" And I wonder, with Modrić and the players he's played with at Real Madrid, and it's like Kyle Walker at Manchester City, do you step outside and think, "Oh, I really want to try this new experience," and you're like, "Oh God, it's different out here in the real world, isn't it?" Do you feel that, and does that become a source of frustration?
I think though, and I love the point you make about the romance of it. That's absolutely true. But I think there's a real sporting need for him there, because again, watching this team up close, there's a lot of guys who are like solid pros, like Yusuf Fofana, Yunus Musa, like guys who do an okay job for you. But it was extraordinary, and something you really notice watching them ringside, the extent to which they're always looking for Rafael Leao. It's like every time someone gets the ball, it's like, where's Leao at? Like, he is the guy. They need more guys who you can look to and say, this guy can do something for us, to just sprinkle a little bit of magic. And while they will have to manage his minutes, I think it's a very logical destination in a sporting sense. I think he can really add something to the team. And I love it.
This question from Bothas on Blue Sky. How are Hamburg likely to fare following their promotion back to the Bundesliga? May I say, Andy, that they are my team in Germany, Hamburg.
Is that right?
Yeah, it is right. So I'm interested in your answer as well.
Well, it's a particularly interesting revelation, that, given that we went out to St. Pauli and did that film there earlier in the season for the OTC YouTube. And I think
they're the
that
rivals, by the way, in case you didn't know.
That is the brilliant thing, I think, that St. Pauli stayed up. And so we'll have the St. Pauli-Hamburg derby in the Bundesliga for the first time in about 15 years, which would be really, really interesting. And I think it's interesting because Hamburg are, by some distance, the bigger club, obviously. St. Pauli are smaller. They lean into being very countercultural, very political. And Hamburg are not like that. They're one of the big beasts. And I think what's so interesting about that, though, is the means they have at the moment are not enormous. It's taken them an awful long time to get back up into the top flight. It was 7 years out of the top flight for a team that had never been relegated up until the point that they went down. And so that has reduced their means and reduced expectation. But they've got a very interesting young coach, Hamburg, and Merlin Poltzen, someone who's very much a Hamburg guy, who stood in when Tim Walter went as caretaker. Then again, when Stefan Baumgart, who you would have bet your house on being a hit at Hamburg, but wasn't, he stepped in for him, and he did well enough that he got the job full-time, has got them promoted now. It meant an enormous amount to him when they got promoted because, his brother was there and all his family were there, all Hamburg fans. So it's a little bit like Edin Terzic, I suppose, at Dortmund. But the fact is, for all the celebration, it was an incredible celebration, obviously, in front of a full house when they got re-promoted. There are limits to what they're going to be able to do. Now, part of that's because of the structure of the club. It's quite difficult to get stuff done because of the layers of bureaucracy that there are in the club. But I think when you look what's happened to, say, Schalke over the last couple of seasons, there must be an enormous amount of gratitude in Hamburg to just be back up in the top flight. They can't hope to get anywhere near the European places. Their only thing next season is to stay up. And if they can win one of the derbies, great. I think you have to be realistic. But of course, having a name like that back in the Bundesliga is a brilliant thing.
From SAFC Cal on YouTube, and staying in Germany, with Jobe Bellingham set to leave my beloved Sunderland for Borussia Dortmund. Are they definitely the right club for him to kick on with, Lars?
I like it. I think just because Dortmund have had a couple of years where maybe they've lost their way a little bit, it's easy to forget that they had this rock solid reputation as being the best finishing school in Europe for elite talent a few years ago. They had that incredible sort of line of of just having someone every year who was the breakout teenage star who all of Europe wanted. Be it Sancho when he was amazing for them. You had Reina, who was super exciting when he was younger. Erling Haaland being the most obvious one. A certain Jude Bellingham, of course. Like, they had this ability to pick up these very, very talented youngsters, give them a platform where, on the one hand, you don't have the kind of pressure you have at the very biggest clubs, but you do also get to experience playing in front of 80,000 people and everything that comes with that. But with a fan base who also accepts that a teenager isn't going to be playing 8, 9 out of 10 every single week. It was a really good conveyor belt for them. And it's dried up a little bit in recent years, but that doesn't change the fact that this is something that they do historically really, really well. And I still think the road to fixing Dortmund, as I think we've spoken about a lot on the pod, is more about getting the framework right around these young players. That there are too many of the senior pros who are meant to be the sort of the guys carrying the load while the youngsters are developing. They've disappointed, and too much has fallen on the youngsters. But at the end of the day, if he goes there, he will go to what is a big club in the European context, that a huge fan base, incredible experience to play at the stadium, but a club that has a proven track record of giving minutes, of putting faith and giving confidence in youngsters. And I like it a lot.
And I suppose he doesn't have to look any further than the trajectory that he's following of his own brother, does he, Andy? Because Jude Bellingham, we clearly, something happened for him when he went to Borussia Dortmund, as it did for the Beatles when they went to Hamburg.
Yes, exactly. And I think we can sometimes make the mistake of assuming that he turns up, we know he's a star, they're lucky enough to have him for 3 years and then he leaves to Real Madrid. But that's not really the story, is it? The fact is, he turns up from Birmingham as a player of enormous potential with, I think, a bit of a reputation as well. Bear in mind that the day that he arrives at the airport in Dortmund, the club send 3 different cars to pick him up to give the press the slip, because he's already got a sense of, this guy's going to be a star. But they work hard on him and he works hard there and he becomes something different. Remember, he wasn't the guy who scored goals when he got there. So I think you look at Jobe Bellingham and you think, okay, well, maybe, well, firstly, he's got to learn to play at the top level. He's got to play in the top division, which he's not done yet. Secondly, he's got to learn, maybe to be a bit decisive in both boxes, or at least one of them, because I don't think we can reasonably expect him to be as good as his brother. That's just not fair. And, clearly he's wanted to step out of that in a sense by not having the name Bellingham on the back of his shirt while he's been at Sunderland. But I think the fact is that he was moulded into the player that he became there. Now, in the first half of his spell, Jude, at Dortmund, he does a lot more tackling and a lot more defensive work. Almost a little bit like Dele Alli at Spurs, I suppose. And then he becomes the guy who scores the goals later on. They think, okay, well, actually, he is the guy who can make that late run into the box. And maybe we start building the team in a way that he can do that more and more. So clearly they're going to have a particular plan for Jobe to be able to do that. I guess there are 2 major questions on whether this will work. The first one being, as Lars said, are Dortmund still able to develop players to that level? Because the players that you would say that they have developed well over the last like little spell are Haaland and Bellingham, who can't be seen as representative of anything or any system because they're such undeniable talents. So you could argue that maybe they develop like that anywhere. It doesn't have to be Dortmund. I think the other interesting thing is the fact that the other possible options for Bellingham would have been Leipzig, who, in terms of player development, you could argue have lost their way a little bit as well. And Eintracht Frankfurt were in the mix as well. Now, I think it got a little bit rich for their blood in terms of the fee that Sunderland wanted in the end. But in terms of the way that they are able to develop players and turn them into superstars or almost ready to be superstars, I think you look at, Kolo Muani, William Pacho. They've been able to do that for years and years. And that really, because Eintracht Frankfurt were one of the clubs who took most of a beating really out of COVID. That has helped them out of that financial pit that they were in, really, the way that they've been able to develop players and sell them and do it in pretty quick time. So it just depends what you think is a reasonable career expectation and what is a reasonable pace of progression for him. Because I think when they're spending this money on Jobe Bellingham, they're not thinking we're going to turn him into a star and sell him in a season and a half. I think they're thinking we're going to develop him over 3 or 4 seasons and then see where we go from there. But I think when you look at what top players cost these days, if they do just simply get like good service out of him for 4 or 5 years, that will prove worth it.
But I guess this is why I like Dortmund for him a little bit better than Frankfurt, because I think if Frankfurt were to bring him in at the kind of money that's being talked about now, it wouldn't be enough for him to be a developmental project. Like if Frankfurt dropped that kind of money on you, you kind of need to be useful and a first teamer from day one and pull your weight. Whereas at Dortmund, there will be a little bit more of a wiggle room. The fans are so used to the club bringing in these prospects, and they've seen how much success that can bring them when they get it right. So they will be supportive. There are very few places in world football where you can play in front of a crowd that big and being a genuine top club, but also have a fan base who totally understand that young players are young players and sometimes need time. So I think he'll come into there will be pressure, of course, but it's also quite a supportive environment, as I understand it. And I spoke to people from the club to do for the Holland book, of course, and it's something they know how to do, and they know how to be patient with kids. I think it's a really good move for him if it happens.
Let's talk game of the week now. Each week, our experts recommend a game for you to watch at the weekend, and just as importantly, they also suggest the food we should be having with it. So, Andy, what are you going for this week?
Oh, it's Spanish Segunda playoff time. I mean, look, the English playoffs may be over.
Lost my wallet there.
It's very good. It is going to be so exciting. And we've got the first leg of Racing Santander against Mirandes this weekend, Sunday, 5:30 p.m. Now, look, when you think club football is finished, readjust your perceptions, because you don't have to straight away lean into the summer leagues, sorry, Lars, of Sweden and Norway, because Spain doesn't finish until ridiculously late. The Segunda playoffs go on way late, way into June. It's NBA finals kind of stuff. And Racing Santander against Mirandes is going to be fascinating, because Mirandes, they were still in the mix to go up automatically on the final day of the season. Now, because the results didn't go for them, even though they won, they didn't. Elche went up automatically with Levante instead. But Mirandes are a small club who've authored a couple of cup shocks over the years, who've spent most of their existence in the 3rd and 4th tier and have established themselves in the 2nd tier, and now they could go up to the top flight for the first ever time. Small team, small club in the northwest of the country, so that would be an amazing story. And Racing Santander, who were a perennial of La Liga when I was first into Spanish football, going back like 30 years or so, and they've really fallen off since then. So they've slowly rebuilt up, and I guess you can look at other teams that are in the promotion mix. Oviedo, who are also in the playoffs, you know, that they've been they dropped way out of not just out of the top flight, but you know, got themselves into massive financial trouble. Racing have been in a similar sort of place. Now, Racing really had to fight to get themselves in the playoffs on the final day. They needed to. They're playing Granada, who could have overtaken them with a win, and they went 1-0 down in pretty quick time, and then came back and won that to secure their playoff place. So, look, this is a massive game, and it's a massive playoff campaign for both of these teams, for very, very different reasons. I think it's going to be super exciting. Now, the food, the options in Cantabria are fantastic.
But
and
remember,
it's all about...
You've lost your wallet in El Segundo, so your options are limited. Sorry, go on.
It's all about hospitality, not about making money there, Dotun. So it'll be fine. I'm sure just for doing the washing up, that they will be quite happy to let you have some squid fried with onions, which is one of the classics, cuttlefish in black ink as well. And of course, I know you want to know what to wash it down with. Well, it's got to be a yard of Asturian cider, I think, from just next door. So
tremendous.
I think we're bending the boundaries geographically here. But you might remember David Villa, of course, when he started out, he's a man from Gijón, when he started out originally, he used to celebrate his goals before he got to Barcelona by miming drinking a yard of Asturian cider.
Is that what he was doing?
Yeah. Never really made it to the Champions League final, that celebration, but it's still pretty good. So I think we've got to include the whole of the North in this.
So that's Sunday at 5:30, Racing Santander versus Mirandes.
Yes.
Calm down, Lars. It's your turn now. I know you got into the drinking a bit too much there, but let's talk about your choice for Game of the Week, shall we?
I should stress I am fully sober recording this. I'm so excited for international football this weekend because we've got Norway facing Italy, and Italy are such a bogey team for us internationally. I'm not sure if people are aware of this, but I mean, we have a dreadful record against them overall. We played 15 times, of which we've lost 8 of them. We've only beaten Italy 3 times, and 3 of them were in friendlies. Italy have knocked us out of both the World Cups. We qualified for 2 World Cups, and Italy knocked us out of both of them. So, I mean, Italy are a real bogey team for us. But I'm quietly optimistic. Over the years, I've fielded so many questions about why Norway are never at these tournaments in spite of having good players. And we've had this nasty tendency of just really shooting ourselves in the foot early on in the qualifying stage. In the qualifiers for World Cup 2022, the Qatar one, we had our key game against Turkey played as the second game of the period. It was our home game, but because of COVID, it had to be played down in Malaga, I think it was, and we lost that. And it was only Ståle Solbakkens second game in charge. He'd had no time with the team, and I think he said in hindsight, if he would have wanted that one back in terms of team selection and tactics. He just got it wrong because he hadn't had enough time to figure out the team, and that set us on the back foot from which we never really recovered in that qualifying campaign. Qualify for last year's Euros, exactly the same thing. We lost to Spain, that happens, but then we clumsily dropped points against Georgia and then had that late collapse against Scotland. Again, we're on the back foot and we never recover. This time, we managed to not mess up in the first 2 games. We dispatched Moldova easily, winning 5-0, but also then went to Israel and avoided, it wasn't played in Israel, but we played against Israel, avoided a boo-boo, won that one 4-2. So now, obviously, Italy are the big dogs in our qualifying group. But we go into that with, it's a little bit of a free hit because Italy are the big dogs, but we also know that if we can get some kind of result, it sets us up very, very well for potentially reaching the World Cup next year. As always with Norway, you know, we have Erling Haaland, who many people feel has had a bad season, but he has the best non-penalty goals per 90 minutes in the Premier League ratio of everyone. So when he's been playing, he has been effective. The guy with the best rate of non-penalty goals per 90 in La Liga is Alexander Sørloth. So we have the most efficient striker in the Premier League and the most efficient striker in La Liga. Got to try to fit them into the same team somehow, and then with Martin Ødegaard pulling the strings, it should be doable against an Italy team that absolutely have quality. They always do, but it isn't the scariest Italy team ever assembled. So from a Norwegian perspective, I rarely get too optimistic about the Norwegian national team because we've been hurt many times. But this is set up to be one of those moments where we could get a statement result. And yeah, it would be a big thing.
You're getting misty-eyed, and it sounds like a cracker. Today at 7:45 p.m. Norway versus Italy. I say cracker, but I don't want to eat knäckebröd with this.
You could.
I could, yeah. Anything on the smörgås board that's better than just dry knäckebröd with a bit of smør?
I mean, this might not be applicable to everyone, but I was in Norway fairly recently, and I caught some fish and ate it almost straight away. Like I went, I caught some trout in the river and just went straight up and cooked it, and it was like less than an hour from river to plate.
You don't straight back in the river like we do.
No, it depends. It depends on where you are and you know what but there's plenty of fish in this river, so that was fine. If you can get some fresh fish with that, trout if you can get it, but salmon will also do.
Yeah, so he's asking us to go fishing to find something to eat.
Oh, you can buy it in the shop.
Sticklebacks.